Okay, we are on page 128, and we're going to divide decimals by decimals. We'll just do a few selected problems. We're going to start on number 5. So I'm going to highlight number 5 here. If you read number 5 from left to right, it is 38 5/10 divided by 0 5/10. So the first thing you have to do is you have to know how to set that up. The first number listed when it's written from left to right is the dividend. So 38 5/10 goes inside the division symbol, and 0 5/10 is the divisor. So when you analyze a long division problem, you always look at the divisor first. And in this case, I noticed that the divisor has a decimal. So think back to what we learned on page 127. If the divisor is a decimal, we have to multiply it by a power of 10 to make it a whole number. So we're going to multiply 0 5/10 times 10. I'm going to prove how that becomes a whole number. 0 5/10 times 10, and that's 5. That's a whole number. So we just multiply by 10. And what we can do to show that we multiply by 10 is we just move that decimal one place to the right. Now, upon doing that to the divisor, you have to do the same thing to the dividend. So 38 5/10 multiplied by 10 would be 385. So that decimal gets moved one place to the right. You could actually now then move your decimal straight up and put your decimal in the quotient. Now we just have long division. How many times does 5 go into 38? That's 7. 7 times 5 is 35. Subtract, and you get 3, and bring down the 5. And you have again, how many times does 5 go into 35? That's 7. 7 times 5 is 35. And when you subtract and get 0 as a remainder, it's an indication that you're done. But before I record my answer on the line, I'm going to go ahead and go over to the problem itself, and I'm going to punch into my calculator what the problem is. 38.5 divided by 0.5, and you get 77 whole, and that is the correct answer. So record that on your line, and we can get ready for number 7. I will erase my whiteboard here. Number 7 is a little bit more complicated than number 5 just because the numbers are bigger, or longer I should say. Number 7. I'll highlight number 7 just like before, and I'm going to practice saying that kind of funny looking long number. 5 and 6,372 10,000ths divided by 0 and 1700ths. So again, the first number listed is the dividend, so that goes inside the division symbol. And the divisor, 0 and 1700ths, goes outside the division symbol. Now let's look at number 7 and notice how it's a little different than number 5. 0 and 1700ths, if we multiply this by 10, last time we multiplied 0 and 5/10 by 10 and it became a whole number. If we multiply this by 10, would it become a whole number? Let's punch that in and see. Just cover up everything except for my divisor. 0.17 times 10, well, that's not a whole number. Well, we don't always multiply by 10. We multiply what are called the powers of 10. So if multiplying by 10 won't make it a whole number, then we'll multiply it by 10 squared, which is 100. And will that make it a whole number? Yes. 1700ths times 100 would be 17. So we take that decimal and we move it 2 places to the right. Like before, when you do that to a divisor, you have to do that to the dividend as well. So 5.6372 times 100 would be the same thing. It would be moving the decimal 2 places to the right. And then like before, I can then just bring the decimal straight up and put it in my quotient, and now I will not get my decimal in the wrong spot when I divide. Now, multiplication chart, this would be a great problem for a multiplication chart because I don't know my 17s very well. How many times does 17 go into 56? That is 3 times, because 3 times 17 is 51. Subtract, you get a difference of 5, and bring down this 3. 17 goes into 53, again 3 times, because 3 times 17 is 51. And you subtract and get 2, and bring down this 7. And 17 goes into 27 once. 1 times 17 is 17. Get a difference of 10, bring down this 2. 17 goes into 102 6 times. 6 times 17 is 102. No remainder, which means I'm done. And like before, I'm going to punch in the problem to my calculator, but I'm going to punch in the problem that I solved originally, not the after I move the decimals. I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to punch in 5.6372 divided by 0.17, and I expect it to be 77. I'm sorry, that was the last problem. I expect it to be 33 and 1600ths, and it is 33 and 1600ths, and that is the correct answer. Okay, this video is going to skip ahead to number 13 because that is a different looking problem. So we'll go ahead and get there. So number 13, I'll highlight this problem, is 90 divided by 0 and 3600ths. Okay, so number 13 looks a little different because we have a whole number and a decimal. And some kids might say, oh, we've done these before. But if you think very carefully, we've actually divided decimals by whole numbers. This one is a whole number divided by a decimal. So let's go ahead and set this up properly. Just like all the other problems like this, the first number listed when it is written left to right is the dividend. And the dividend goes inside the division bank. So for number 13 here, 90 goes inside. And the divisor, 0 and 3600ths, that goes outside. So this is the correct way to set this up. I will pause just a second and allow you to join me. Okay, so now, if you think about this, if you're kind of quick at thinking about this, you'll pose this question to yourself: how am I supposed to move the decimal twice in the divisor when there's no decimal in the dividend? How am I supposed to do that? Well, I'll show you. So again, when you start a problem like this, you just start with the divisor. And if you notice that it has a decimal, your first step is to say, what do I need to multiply that by to make that a whole number? Well, 3600ths times 100 would become a whole number. That would be 36. So you would multiply by 100, making that decimal move 2 places to the right. So then you're supposed to immediately do the same thing to the dividend that you did to the divisor. And this is what I was just talking about. How do you move a decimal in 90 when you don't see a decimal? Well, this is a good place to remember that 90 is the same as 90 with a decimal at the end of it. Now that you have a decimal there, could you multiply by 100, which would be moving it 2 places to the right? So what I'll do here is I'll annex 2 zeros and then move my decimal 2 places to the right. So that is what's tricky about number 13. So now that I've moved my decimal 2 places to the right, what I can do is just bring it straight up into my quotient so that I can't get it in the wrong spot. Now I have 9,000 divided by 36. And this is going to require some good computation skills because a multiplication chart doesn't go up to 36. So I just need to use some common sense here. How many times does 36 go into 90? I think that's only twice. 3 times 36 would be above 90, so I'm going to put a 2 above that 0. And 2 times 36 is 72. And carefully subtract. 10 minus 2 is 8, and I borrowed, making that an 8. Minus 1 is 7. So now I've got 18. Drop this 0, I've got 180. Now I ask myself how many times does 36 go into 180? And this might require a little guess and check, so I'll do 36 times 5. I happen to know that it is 5, but it's probably what I would have guessed anyway. 5 times 6 is 30. 5 times 3 is 15, plus 3 is 18. And I guessed right, it goes in 5 times. So I put a 5 above this 0 right here. 5 times 36 is 180. Now this is another spot where you could run into a little mistake. 180 minus 180 is 0. So students who have paid attention to these problems remember that I've said that you're done dividing when you get a remainder of 0. So some kids might look at this and say, well, I'm done, I got a remainder of 0. But there's 2 ways that you should notice that that's not true. One, I do have another 0 here that I'm going to drop, and also I have a space in my quotient right here before I get to my decimal. So my answer can't just have a big blank in it. So I'm going to undo that big space right there. I'm going to drop this 0, and I'm going to ask myself how many times does 36 go into 0? It's 0 times. Some kids would say it can't, but I would say yes, it goes in 0 times. And then, if you wanted to, you could do 0 times 36 is 0, and 0 minus 0 is 0. So there's our final 0, which means we're done dividing. And it's a whole number. It's 250 with the decimal at the end. And then what I'm going to do, like I've done a couple other times, is I'm just simply going to punch in the problem as it was given to me. 90 divided by 0.36. And it is a whole number of 250. Okay, if this method that I'm using hasn't been super clear to you on this video, I suggest going back and studying page 127, reading exactly the directions, and then coming back and checking out this video again.